We're doing a 2-4 today. Bellator 277 plus the UFC Fight Night this weekend, which is headlined by... Why am I blanking on what the headliner is? Luque versus Muhammad 2. There you go. It's a thin UFC card. The Bellator card is pretty good, although I'm not going to really touch the bottom 6 fights or so because there's not a lot to say. There's not a lot of footage on them. I also need to get a better webcam at some point. If you're watching the YouTube version of this, I'm back to the old webcam because the new one kind of stinks. Couple of random hodgepodge notes. Aljo Sterling is in a fight with everybody on Twitter in regards to the disrespect he's had, and I don't blame him. Personally, the way I look at it is, people are like going like it's not champion-like to engage with your haters, whatever. What are we talking about? What MMA champion or boxing champion hasn't engaged with the haters? Sure, are there better ways to spend your energy? Yeah, absolutely. But let's not be silly about this. And Kay Hansen got cut from the UFC along with Alex Oliveira. I don't suspect we'll see Oliveira back. He's a little bit old, and I think his problems are very much ingrained into him. I don't think there's a fix for it. For Kay Hansen, it's interesting because she has all the technical capabilities, all the physical capabilities that you would need to be a good strawweight, but she's had significant problems making weight. She's had significant problems mentally and getting things together. So when you add those things in, it will be hard. I don't know. It's tough things to solve. But she is, I think, 22 years old, super young, has, 13, 15 years of general career? Like, I mean, even possibly as many as 20? So maybe we'll see her back if she could fix some things. So let's go through the AJ McKee card versus Pitbull, number 2 at the start here. Featherweight world title for Bellator. Of course, I do think of Bellator as a world title. I know that that's kind of slightly controversial. This is, of course, a rematch of a pretty definitive fight, but definitely one that makes a lot of sense because there's not a lot else in the featherweight division that people are really going to want to see. Like, this is the fight to make, so why not make it? I'm picking McKee to win again. I picked McKee the first time, actually, because I've always had in my head a little bit of distrust with Patricio's, the Pitbulls in general, fight style. It's a little bit defensively open. It's a little bit reliant on being way better physically than the opponent. And also there's the fact that he is a 5'6" featherweight, which is pretty short. 65.5 inch reach to a 73.5 inch reach. Needless to say, little bit of a problem. I see McKee kind of doing the similar things again. He's a good boxer. He's also got great hand speed. He's got good power. He puts his combinations together well. He's a good wrestler. He's a very opportunistic and venomous grappler. He has all the abilities to take advantage of the Pitbull defensive deficiencies. Despite the fact that Pitbull is very venomous in his own right, heavy-handed, powerful, nasty, aggressive, will overwhelm you at times. I just don't think that works on a consistent basis against McKee. Now, if he goes out there and knocks McKee out, or club and sub, or whatever, it's not going to surprise me at all. He's the sort of guy that always has that puncher's chance / choker's chance, if you will. And I have no doubt that he'll possibly have moments. But I do think McKee just has the better put together game. And I think AJ McKee's outstanding. There's a lot of talk about him probably leaving Bellator because they're currently talking about the championship or the contract situation. He's on the champions clause. Otherwise, he would really ponder making that step. Possible destination with the UFC. Scott Coker's been talking about how they would love to do some co-promotion. My thoughts on the whole co-promotion thing is there seems to be two kind of extreme and somewhat annoying camps. You have the camp that wants to, I guess they want Coker to stop talking about it, I think is probably their goal. And but the media asks about it, the fighters bring it up and stuff, like Coker has to talk about it. And they criticize Coker for being like, the ball is in the UFC's court, which to me doesn't make a lot of sense because the ball is in the UFC's court. I mean, where else is that ball? Because Bellator's willing to do it. The UFC's got the power in that kind of structure. And the ball, it just is in the UFC's court. That being said, there's no reason for the UFC to do it. And that's kind of where the other camp that I find a little bit annoying, because they're like, why are people not hyped up about this or whatever? Why are people like belittling this and stuff? And it's like, because it's not going to happen. What's the point of getting really, really hyped about something that's not going to happen? We've seen the UFC refuse to co-promote with basically anyone outside of some very brief moments, Pride. And even that, like, so we're talking like almost 20 years ago. They didn't go with M1 on the co-promotion thing. They've given Conor McGregor some co-promotion. That's really about it. It's not going to happen. So there's no sense getting too deep and dissecting it. The other title fight is Vadim Nemkov defending against Corey Anderson. Or is this just the tournament championship, or is this a belt fight? I guess it's not. No, it's got the belts. It's got the belts. Now, is it just the tournament title? I think it's championship belt. Either way, not really affected either way. The thing going against Nemkov here is that absolutely he is trying to win in a manner that Corey Anderson historically has never lost in, which is trying to out-wrestle Corey. Because Corey's losses are all kind of... Just quickly look at his record here to make sure that I'm not missing something. Like this, the knockout to Jan Blachowicz. OSP knocked him out. Manawa knocked him out. And then the losses to... Yeah, and the loss to Gian Vellante and to Shogun. It's all been kind of like a big power shots on the feet. And Nemkov's striking game, one, he's at a 3-inch reach disadvantage, so there's obviously that problem. Anderson does have a safety buffer that he can utilize. He's also been getting a lot better as a striker, because if you recall, when Anderson hit the UFC, he was really just kind of this rush in there, hard work, beast in 25-8, which was a terrible nickname, wrestler type. And he would kind of walk himself into power shots and get whacked that way. He doesn't really do that anymore. So the chances to knock him out, I think, are less. Notably less. And Nemkov doesn't have the greatest power. Like, I don't think it's a walk in the park to get hit by Vadim Nemkov in any way. Absolutely not. But I do think that there are limitations to him as a striker. And if he can't just take down Anderson, what happens? Now, mind you, am I overselling? Well, I mean, he did hit head kick Ryan Bader. But, like, you know, he's also kind of out-grappled or out-wrestled guys like Phil Davis, who's probably a better wrestler than Anderson, although a far less comfortable striker. And that leaves me kind of in a weird spot I'm going to go with Corey Anderson to win here. I think that he's going to be exceptionally hard to out wrestle. I think his stand-up has been getting a fair bit better. He's looked honestly better than ever against Ryan Bader. Like, I thought Bader would beat him, and it did not happen. Yeah. So Anderson, decision probably. Nemkov's hard to finish. Anderson's not a bona fide, complete drop dead kind of guy. And I think that sums it up. Although it's a really interesting fight. It's higher. Like, these are two guys that arguably could be fighting for a UFC 205 title. And I know no one's gonna like hearing that because, oh no, they're not in the UFC. They're not actually any good. Which is kind of ridiculous. Aaron Pico versus Adley Edwards. I'm not familiar enough with Adley Edwards, and he's drawing like plus 740 odds, and Aaron Pico's minus 1200. I don't know why we're still putting ridiculous odds on Aaron Pico, because he's kind of let us down a few times. Like the super hype probably should have died after he got the back-to-back losses to Corrales and to Boric. And yeah, he's won 5 straight, but it's also not over the greatest competition in the world. So I don't know. Pico will probably win. They want him to win. I expect he will win. Linton Vassell versus Tim Johnson. I am going with Tim Johnson. Like, Vassell's problem is quite simple. Is like, he's up fighting at heavyweight, and I think he's just too small. I think he'll find his way into the clinch with Tim Johnson. I think Tim Johnson will be able to manhandle him and do his thing. Like, losing to Fedor and to Valentin Moldavsky doesn't really make me think that you can lose to Linton Vassell. Although I'm seeing that Vassell's got favored odds on this fight, so I don't really know what to make of that. Because, I mean, beating Matt Mitrione, Chuck Congo, Tyrell Fortune, it should be. I mean, outside of losing to Junior Albini, Tim Johnson's got a great pedigree. The people that have beat him, Jared Rosholt, I know we don't like him, but his singular skill set is incredibly good. Alexander Volkov, Chuck Congo, Vitaly Minikov, Moldavsky, and Fedor. Like, these are very, very good heavyweights, and I'm not sure if I rank Vassell on that level. How has Vassell been doing as a heavyweight? He beat Sergey Haratonov, he beat Tyrell Fortune, and he beat Roddy Marquez, which shouldn't. Marquez is not a heavyweight. Lost to Moldavsky. I don't know. Johnson's just too big, too tough. I got him. Tyrell Fortune versus Rakeem Cleveland. Fortune, this is more or less a setup for Fortune to win. He's minus 1200, so he's got the same odds that Aaron Pico does. The loss to Linton Vassell has taken a little bit of has maybe taken a little bit of shine off of him, but Cleveland's a journeyman. And then we have, oh Lord, I am never gonna pronounce this guy's name right. It's Yag Shimradov is the last name. I'm not even trying the first name. Versus Rafael Carvalho. Carvalho has been on a big losing streak lately. I've been pretty impressed with what I've seen from Yag. He's a weirdly put together fighter. It's not necessarily the smartest way to fight. And he's lost 2 in a row to Corey Anderson and Carl Albrechtsen. But those are 2 really, really good fighters. I think he'll get the job done and get his first win in Bellator. He's an interesting, weird, kooky fighter. He strikes well. He scrambles well. He wrestles well. Carvalho's not a bad fighter by any means, but I'm pretty sure is more middleweight size than anything else, and that's a big problem. Another setup fight, Gaston Bolaños versus Daniel Carey. That will be Bolaños winning. And Kyle Crutchmer versus Michael Lombardo. I'm going with Crutchmer on that one. That one's a little bit more interesting. They're two guys who are actually kind of like interesting prospects. Although in the case of Lombardo, he is also 32 years old, so I don't know if prospect is quite the right word. But that's another setup fight. And then the rest of them are between like there's a fight on here with a combined 1-0 record. And an 0-1 record. And a 5-5. Yeah, these are not high level worth your time fights at the bottom of the card. But the top of the card, very, very good. I think that's a very good card. I think it's been chronically underpromoted by Bellator. They've done a terrible job promoting it. I was actually in this conversation with someone, and we were debating whether the UFC's monopoly practices are the sole source of their power. A big part of it has been opposing promotions just not being very good at promoting their stuff, or just running it in various ways. Like Elite XC, serious problems there. Pride, Yakuza connections, obviously. Strikeforce had all kinds of problems, and of course Bellator, and then World Series of Fighting. It's all been a mess, and it does definitely help the UFC retain their market share in a very big way that a lot of fighting promotions are not run particularly well or particularly savvy. So let's get on to the fight night card. Vincente Luque versus Belal Muhammad. Rematch of a fight that Luque did win some time ago. I will get really quickly the actual time period. It was back in 2016. So late 2016. So we'll call that about 5 years. They're both better fighters than when they fought last time. And they're both interestingly flawed in ways that are pretty common, but also very good in ways. In the case of Luque, his flaw is defensive responsibility. Both on the feet and in terms of wrestling, and even on a grappling level. Luque is a little bit absent-minded defensively. He's pretty hittable, actually. He's pretty easy to take down. He's gotten better at that. And he will be put in bad places on the ground, but he somehow survives all of this to put it all together, despite not being what you would call like an S-tier athlete. He doesn't have S-tier physicality, but he does hit hard, he is fast, so on. I do always worry a little bit about him that he'll fall off a cliff very suddenly. He has that fighting style where he takes a lot of punishment. The wars with Brian Barberena, and even the first fight with Belal Muhammad is a reasonably good option to this. The Nico Price fights, the Reddy Brown fights, the Mike Perry fight. These are all fights where he went to war. And it probably took some time. I guess I'm trying to remember them. I need to remember that Muhammad got finished in the first round the first time. So not so much that fight, but there's a lot of pretty intense wars in Luque's background that at some point I think his durability is just going to kind of go away. Now, that doesn't affect how I see this fight because Muhammad is probably of the top 15 at welterweight, one of the least punchy fighters in terms of like his ability to put you down, to do work, basically, because he is I don't want to say pillow-fisted, but it's probably the best way of putting it. Like, he's got no knockdowns on his record, but he has absolutely made the most of himself. He's adapted to being kind of a new age John Fitch in some ways, where sure, it's a little bit boring, but he's got the hustle, the work ethic. His stand-up is technically competent enough that he's not hopeless while pursuing the takedown, and he'll get the takedown quite often. The only problem is that if he gets caught at range, he can be outmaneuvered because he's not especially tall or especially lanky for the division. He's 5'11", which is fine, at 71 inches, which is fine. But he's facing a 5'11" Vincente Luque with a 76-inch reach. So you got a 5-inch reach disadvantage at play. You've got the ability of Luque to land significant strikes. We've seen that he can knock him out. We've seen that he's got those tools available to him. And we've seen that he's got the ability to counter Muhammad pretty well. If it goes to the ground, sure, I think Muhammad can control him, but this is a 5-round fight. Do I think he avoids the potential fire, both on the ground and on the feet, for 25 minutes in the cage? No. And that's why I'm taking Luque to probably win by stoppage. Probably takes a little bit longer than the minute and change that it took last time. I think Muhammad's a more defensively responsible fighter now. And I'll say second or third round stoppage. Luque can keep up with Muhammad's pace. He can do things. And Muhammad's on a great run here. Like a amazing run. A run that I probably didn't see coming. But at the same time, it's a run against a lot of fighters who are, in one way or another, considerably flawed. Like in Wonderboy and Maya's case, they're significantly older. And they're also pretty one-dimensional. In Diego Lima, you have a guy who does not respond to pressure at all well. Takashi Sato is not built correctly for the UFC, and Curtis Millender also doesn't really have a response for pressure. So that really just kind of leaves the Lehman Good fight as like a really good one. And sure, there are some comparisons to be made. Good to Luque, because he's a good striker, well put together, technical, powerful, strong, can counter wrestle. But Luque is much more dangerous, much more creative, much more unpredictable than Good is. And we're not that far removed from Muhammad losing to Jeff Neal. So yeah, I've got to take Vincente Luque to win this fight. I feel like I'm missing a fight. There it is. Cal Barallo versus Gadzi Omar Gadziev. One, this is a super weird co-main event. It's two debuting fighters who don't even necessarily have a ton of hype behind them debuting in a co-main. It's very weird. And I don't think it necessarily even makes a great matchup, even though I'm reasonably bullish on both of these fighters as prospects. In Ohio, I think that's how it's pronounced. You've got, it's an overused comparison because every time a karate guy comes in, we get kind of the Machida comparison, but it's kind of the Machida comparison. He's utilizes kind of like some karate style stuff. He's a little bit low output, but good timing, good accuracy, and harder to take down than you would expect, and a better offensive wrestler than you would expect. Doesn't have the heavy hips of Machida, but he does dig for underhooks very well, reacts to pressure quite well when it comes to wrestling, keeps it on the feet, but at the same time, doesn't have a lot of separation from clinching and can be put there. And Omar Gadziev, continuing our horrible, super simplistic comparisons to way better fighters, has the Khabib Nurmagomedov game to a certain degree. He wants to get close to you. He wants to clinch with you. He wants to put you on the mat. And in the case of Borgello, he can't keep distance that well. He doesn't have the distance-keeping tools that you would really need to make his game work. So I think he is going to find himself in the clinch, and I think he is going to find himself on the mat at some point. And Omar Gadzhiev has a suffocating top game. He'll grind away. He'll also be opportunistic. He'll go for like things like knee bars and stuff, which is interesting. In that regard, he's not very Khabib. And I'm picking him to win this fight by decision. I just think that I'm probably more interested in Kyle going forward. Number one, he fights out of Fighting Nerds gym, which I mean is awesome. But and he's a more unique prospect, whereas Omar Gadzhiev kind of fits into that a mold that a lot of other fighters fit in. Like it feels like probably like one or two per card make their debut and kind of have this same kind of basic generic archetype. And as a result of that, he's not supremely interesting in that regard, but he's probably better structured and again, will probably win this particular fight. Although at 6'1", he only has a 67-inch reach. Some short arms. I mean, for comparison purposes, I have a 72-inch reach. And I'm 5'11". I don't know. I don't know if he just has super short arms or what. But there's that's a minimalistic reach. Andre Fiallo and Miguel Baeza. Both of these guys are flawed in very, very different ways. And of course, that's the case in most. But I think these two have a flaw that makes me really concerned about what they can do with their careers. Let me get specific. Andre Fiallo is a pressure fighter, mostly boxer, but he'll kick as well. He'll wrestle a little bit too. He's out of Sanford MMA, which is, of course, the home of the great Henry Hooft, who is both an amazing striking coach and a terrible, 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 terrible quarterman. Because he is tough love personified. And the problem with that is that if your fighter doesn't have an inherent deep well of confidence and self-comfort, you end up breaking your own fighter quite often. And I think that's what he does with Fiallo at times, because Fiallo doesn't seem to be supremely confident. He'll be pressuring someone, like Michel Pereira in his UFC debut, and he'll second guess himself. He'll have that moment of indecision, that moment of discomfort, that moment of lacking confidence. And because you're pressuring, you're going forward. That is a big problem, because when you are a pressure fighter and you're putting the pressure forward, you have to be incredibly quick with your reactions to what the opponent is doing. And if you have second guessing moments, you're going to get in very big trouble. So that's the thing, is he has a really well put together technical game. He has a really good idea mentally of what he wants to do. But when he gets out there, he'll second guess himself. He'll have that indecision, that lack of confidence. And for Baeza, it's kind of the same thing. Like, he's developing a game that I think suits his frame. 6'2" at welterweight, 74.5 inches. It's good reach. It's good outside game work. He's got good inherent timing. He's fairly accurate. He's got good snap in his strikes. He's got all the physical tools for a really, really good counter game. But a really, really good counter game also relies on depth of defense and depth of offense. And he's defensively considerably bad. And his counters become predictable because he's only got like 3 or 4 different really setups that he seems really, really comfortable with. And that's a significant problem. So, like, that's the thing, is they're flawed in a way that directly, I think, really makes their fighting styles way less effective than they should be, despite them having the physical tools and a good idea of what they're doing, and so on. As for the fight itself, I think that Fialho will pressure Baeza, but that's also what Baeza wants. So I think Baeza will have his moments, but I think Baeza's lack of defense is much, much more of a problem, because I don't think we really realized it on the regional scene when he was coming up and beating guys like Victor Reina and Matthew Colhoun and Leo Valdivia, and then even into the UFC, where he fought notably physical, porous fighters like Hector Aldana, the aging Matt Brown, and fellow, very much counter fighter, Takeshi Sato, and got those wins. It kind of showed up in the Santiago Ponzinibbio fight and really badly in the Chaos Williams fight. Now, he was having a lot of success against Ponzinibbio, arguably winning the fight up until towards the end. But that's also a Ponzinibbio who was coming off of a long layoff and having some problems. And they wound up, and then lost the decision to him, despite having early success. Once Ponzinibbio figured out his stuff, he kind of took him to school. And I haven't seen Fialho's game completely fall apart yet. Not completely. So I'm taking him to win this by decision. I think he'll pressure him. I think he'll do a good enough job of reading into the relatively limited set of counters that Baeza likes to apply, while basically being able to land virtually at will to his opponent. So Fialho by decision, but it wouldn't surprise me if he has a moment of just indecision while he's having success even, and gets clocked really hard. But he does seem to have a fairly decent chin. I don't think he's been knocked out a ton. Was knocked out by Chris Curtis and Chidi Njokuani, but both of those guys are way more creative than Baeza. And Njokuani is much bigger. He's a 6'3", very legitimately sized middleweight. So there is also that. Yeah, no, I'm gonna go with that. It wouldn't surprise me. By the way, Fialho is the underdog. I don't always touch on the odds unless they play kind of a narrative into the fight, but I do think this is worth bringing out, because at underdog odds, Fialho, it's maybe worth a look. I don't really recommend betting on MMA in general in big numbers, but if you are so inclined, this is a fight to maybe look at. Mayra Bueno Silva versus Yanan Wu. So these two have like the opposite problems. Mayra Bueno Silva is amazingly physically destructive, like imposing. She has all the power you could ask for. What she is lacking, though, is any smoothness to her technique. She is, whether it's striking or whether it's grappling, she is clunky as all heck. There's no polish, there's no smoothness, there's no there's no coordination to her game, I guess is what it is in a nutshell. And in Yanan Wu, she lacks the physicality that you would really need to compete at this level. And despite being the, doing air quotes here, natural bantamweight, She's probably actually less powerful than Bueno Silva. And she's also one of these fighters that always kind of confuses me because she looks profoundly uncomfortable when she's being hit. Every human on the planet dislikes being punched, unless there's something significantly wrong with you. And that includes fighters. But fighters tend to not have if it's a 10-point scale of aversion, they tend not to have like a 7+ aversion to it. Because you're going to get hit. Now, Wu will get uncomfortable and then refocus and get back in there, but it always makes me wonder why someone chooses fighting as a profession, knowing that there's not a lot of financial gain in it, and knowing that you're going to get hit, and if you're distinctly uncomfortable with it, why do you chase it so much that you actually end up in the UFC? Is always very, very weird to me. As for the fight itself, Wu tends to end up in the clinch. Silva's super strong. Silva's better on the ground. Silva's a harder hitter if they're just exchanging punch for punch. Wu is the better put together striker. There's a lot more polish. There's a lot more flow to her than there is with Silva, which is not surprising. I just went through the whole thing about how there is no flow, there is no polish to Silva's game. And I have to pick the super athletic, well, not even necessarily super athletic, but super powerful girl to beat the scrappy girl who adjusts and does really definitely tries her best and tries to maximize what physical gifts she has. I'm a much bigger fan of Wu, or at least the type of fighter that Wu is, because I will forever respect any fighter that makes the best of a situation. And I don't think that Silva actually does. But I don't really see how she wins. I don't see the path to victory on the table for her. I just don't, despite the flaws in Mayra Bueno Silva's game. Pat Sabatini versus TJ Laramie. I hate to do this to TJ Laramie, a fellow Canadian, but this is the easiest pick on the card. And I'm also really confused why we are getting this fight, because Laramie lost his debut in the UFC, and Pat Sabatini has won his first 3 UFC fights. I do see that Sabatini was booked against Gavin Tucker for last week's card on the pay-per-view. So maybe that's the deal here. Maybe it's just they offered Laramie the fight. They couldn't get it together for last week, and now they're doing it because... okay, never mind. Because originally this looks like this was supposed to be Laramie versus Bagdasarian. Okay, so Bagdasarian withdrew. I think that's probably why we have this fight. So it makes sense, but it doesn't necessarily make it any more compelling. Laramie is fairly one-dimensional. Wants to take you down. Wants to grapple with you. Kind of has to. He's a 5'6" featherweight, which we're talking about with Patricio Pitbull Freire. Pitbull makes up for it by being an insane person. Laramie more or less just goes with the standard kind of fire hydrant fight style, which is I'm going to close the gap, I'm going to grab you, I'm going to take you down, and Sabatini is a way better grappler. Like Pat Sabatini is a very, very good grappler. Particularly deadly from top, but also has a game from bottom. He'll go for leg locks. He'll go for heel hooks. He'll go for arm bars. So he's immensely good. And yeah, I don't. I mean, we saw Laramie get submitted by Derek Minner. Don't get me wrong, getting submitted by Derek Minner is actually probably not the worst thing in the world. Minner does overwhelm people. He's exceedingly dangerous at the start of the fight. But at the same time, Laramie didn't have the rounded skills to avoid that venomous aspect of Minner's game, and I don't see how he avoids it with Sabatini. Yeah, Sabatini by submission. This fight makes me sad, and that's the Munir Lazez versus is it Anje Lusa? I think is how you say it, or Losa, I think. And I'm sad about it because, of course, it was supposed to be Elizu Zaleski dos Santos, Capoeira, who was fighting in this, and I'm always excited to see him fight because he's exceedingly violent and it's really fun. Lazez has notable weaknesses in his game, and there's a reason I was going to pick Zaleski to beat him. He's a little bit predictable. He has a super high guard, which leaves him open to the body, leaves him open to the legs quite a bit. And I thought Zaleski would take advantage of that, but with Losa, not so much. He's kind of a low output power striking kickboxer. He's a little bit of a headhunter. He doesn't vary up to the body that much, doesn't vary up to the legs that much, doesn't vary that much, I guess, in a nutshell. And combine that with Lazez being the taller fighter, the longer fighter, I see Lazez living up to his nickname of the sniper and getting the job done here, being a little bit busier, being a little bit cleaner, a little bit more technical, and getting the job done. And also, I think Losa suffers from a similar issue in that I was talking about earlier with Fiallo, and that is Henry Hooft as a coach. I don't think it's necessarily I don't think he's necessarily suits it. I'm not saying that no one can work with Hooft. I mean, obviously, he's been a big part of why Kamaru Usman is so good, why Gilbert Burns is so good. I mean, obviously, the success is there. That Sanford MMA and the various forms of the Black Zillions and the Jacko Hybrid Center and whatever have produced really, really good fighters. But I think it takes someone who's just has an immense well of confidence, and I don't think Lusa has that. And that's not why I'm picking Lazez, but the short notice, that's more the short notice. I think this is a stylistically favorable matchup for Lazez. But I think a big part of it is I also don't think Luce is going to look all that comfortable exploding things. The Sniper versus Last Ninja, good nickname battle. Also a bit of a weird flag match mix up here. We got Tunisia versus Switzerland, which is not a combination you see a lot of in MMA. So there you go. This is the weirdest fight on the card because it's a heavyweight fight, and I'm not really sure why either guy is at heavyweight. And that is, I kind of get why William Knight is at heavyweight. Devin Clark versus William Knight. William Knight is at heavyweight because, I assume because he missed weight really badly for the Maxine Grishin fight, but he also took that fight on super short notice, and I don't think it really indicates anything about his ability to make 205 when given a full fight camp. And I have no idea why Devin Clark is up at heavyweight, because Devin Clark's problems are not related, are kind of related to the fact that he gets hit really hard. That's probably going to come up at heavyweight. Can William Knight win this fight? Absolutely. I mean, I just said Devin Clark's problems tend to be he gets hit really hard. He gets walked into stuff all the time. He's pathologically without defense, and he will get hurt a lot over the course of his career. And of course, he's coming off of major dental surgery. Um, but William Knight is a really bad fighter. He's super strong. He's super powerful. But he's also super not very coordinated. He's very much one strike at a time. There's no flow or combinations or volume or pace to his game. He just kind of scares you with his power and then wins, or he doesn't scare you with his power and loses. I'm going to assume that bigger hitters have not scared Devin Clark off, and that Devin Clark will be able to put on his pressure wrestle boxer game and win this fight by decision. And it'll be interesting to see what they weigh in it, I guess. I don't think this is a good idea for either of them in terms of weight class change. At respectively 6 feet and 5'10", they're exceedingly short heavyweights. They were short light heavyweights, to be honest. And that's really all I got. This is not a fight to look forward to. It's not a fight to be super intrigued by. It might give us a neat knockout, but that's about it. Really, it's like William Knight is Derek Lewis, but with less Derek Lewisness. That's the best I've got for it. Lena Landsberg returns from having a baby and will be fighting Pani Kianzad. These two met up before very, very early in their careers. I don't think that fight has a ton of relevance to what's going to happen here because it occurred in 2012. It was Landsberg's debut fight. It was Kianzad's third fight. It's also kind of weird that they were starting their career around the same time despite being 10 years apart in age. It's interesting. Kianzad's only 30. I always think she's older. It's a slightly weird question when it comes to these two. And it's more about Kianzad because Kianzad, with her physicality, with her skill set, with her smooth technical striking, should be a way safer pick than she ever is. She should win fights easier than she does. And that's always very concerning, very troubling when it comes to picking up her fights because it's hard to imagine a way that Landsberg wins this fight comfortably. She's got a good clinch game. She's got a good wrestling game from the clinch. And she's got a good striking game from the clinch. She can take you down. She can punish you. She can do some things. But she doesn't necessarily even have great tools for getting you into the clinch. But Kianzad also will probably go into the clinch quite willingly. And that means that we'll probably have a way closer fight than we should. But at the same time, I also really can't pick Landsberg off of a long layoff at 40 years old, having just had a baby. Don't get me wrong. We've seen a historical, actually pretty good trend of fighters becoming moms, coming back and actually looking pretty good. But 40 is towards the end of a fighting career. And she's never been the most impressive fighter to begin with. So I'm going to go Kianzad by decision. She's better at most things, honestly, than Landsberg. I think she's a better range striker. I think she's a better pocket striker. I think she's a better grappler. I think she's a better wrestler. And she did beat her before. So there is that small mental edge, even if I don't think a fight from 9 years ago is that relevant. Um, Another easy pick, Jakar Close versus Brandon Jenkins. I'm going with Jakar Close. Brandon Jenkins will struggle, I think, to win fights in the UFC because his game is based on variety, creativity, unpredictableness, toughness, and not a lot of actual physical ability. And to be honest, it's kind of weird that Jakar Close is not on the main card. Of course, he's coming off of 3 canceled bouts, 2 of which were his fault. Not really. I mean, his cornerman contracted COVID that got the Luis Pena fight canceled, and then he got shoved by Jeremy Stevens. So neither of them were his fault, but he was the pull-out party in 2 of them, and Jai Herbert pulled out of the fight as well. This is a guy who is going up pretty well in the world. Christos Giagos, Bobby Green, Leno Venata. He had that embarrassing fight with David Tamor, of course, where he threw a hissy fit when Tamor wouldn't just stand in front of him. And on the other side of the equation, you have Brandon Jenkins, who's coming off a loss to Zurong. So I don't really know why this fight was made. I don't really know why it's on the preliminary card. As far as I could tell, it was always supposed to be the fight. And that makes it very, very weird. Close is more physical. I think he's the better striker. I think he's the better grappler. I think he's the better wrestler. I think he'll win this fight really easily. But we'll find out, I guess. Also, does he actually have a tattoo of the state of Michigan on his chest? Is he from Michigan? Honestly? Yeah, okay, South Haven, Michigan. Okay. Still weird. Still weird. I think I've made that comment before, but I continue to think about it or miss it. Jesse Ronson comes into his fight with Rafa Garcia as the underdog. Interesting. I might put a little money on that. Ronson's not a terribly diverse fighter. He's a good pocket striker. That's what he's good at. That's what he wants to do. He's back down at middle or lightweight, which is a good idea. Rafa Garcia is predisposed to being a brawler, although he's got a pretty good wrestling game. It would be interesting if he does wrestle him, but Garcia tends to have to be convinced that he wants to wrestle, and I don't know. Ronson's a very beatable fighter, but at the same time, so is Garcia. I'm going to go with Ronson. I think he gets the fight he wants, at least at the start. Because, like I said, if Garcia is convinced to wrestle with him, I think he'll have success. But I also think that he wants to be a brawler. And I don't think his coaching is necessarily dissuading him of that notion. So Ronson by decision in what should be a pretty fun fight. Pretty brawl heavy, pretty sloppy, pretty fun. And from that we go on to a fight that could be incredibly bad. Chris Barnett, Beast Boy, Huggy Bear versus Martin Buday or Budai. I think it's Budai. I am going to pick Barnett because if he wins, it might be fun. I like to say that I stay unemotionally invested in the fight when I'm breaking it down. This is one of those times I'm going to make that exception. Not because of anything. It's nothing about Budai being a bad guy or whatever. I don't know. I don't know enough about him, frankly. But his game is to get beat up and then suck you into the clinch and get work done and tire you out and eventually finish you. And it's not super fun to watch. And Barnett can be super fun to watch. I mean, he's coming off of the whole wheel kick knockout. To be clear, not usually how he wins because I don't think I think I was looking at his Tapology page before, and I believe that is his only kick knockout. Punches. Don't have a method on his win over Shinichi Suzukawa. Well, I do, but it's just TKO. It doesn't say punches or kicks. Kick it. Okay, no, I'm wrong. Emil Zahariev. Hey, Emil popping up again. He's like my obscure fighter that I always enjoy seeing pop up in a bunch of guys who fight in the UFC's roster. As being like probably way better than he looks on paper. He did kick him. And then there are 2 other TKO KOs that don't have methods. So there might be more, but point is that the whole big spinning, the whole big kicking game isn't necessarily going to be something he replicates on a regular basis. So don't get hoping for that, is what I'm saying. But if he wins, it might be fun. And even when he's not kicking people, it is still fun. Like, he fights with a high energy style, which tends to burn his cardio out. But he does interesting things, creative things, striking wise. He's way shorter than anyone that he's going to be fighting at heavyweight. Of course, he's 7 inches shorter than Budai in this case. Although apparently only has a 2-inch reach disadvantage. So there you go. Kind of super long arms, maybe. I don't know. Yeah. I don't think this is. I don't have a breakdown for this fight. I don't. I don't. I really don't. It's heavyweight, and it's the most random, insane form of heavyweight. Of like, does Barnett have a way to keep out of the clinch with Budai? Does Budai have the ability to weather the storm? I mean, there's interesting questions there, but there's not a lot of technical breakdown to be had. Trey Ogden and Jordan Leavitt. This is another fairly easy fight, I think. Interesting that Ogden is the favorite. He's debuting in the UFC, and I don't think he's that great. I also just realized there are like 3 camps that dominate this card. Like, there's a lot of Sanford MMA, a lot of Syndicate, and a lot of Glory fighters. Bit interesting in that regard. Leavitt's a very limited fighter. He's very uncomfortable as a striker. Very problematic, very like bad posture and everything. Like, he's going to get lit up a lot. But Ogden, well, he is a confident striker, and it doesn't look bad. There's good snap. There's good ideas to his stand-up. He's remarkably unpowerful. Doesn't really sit down on anything. Really fleeting. Really, backpedaling a lot. And he's really pretty likely to get taken down. And he's also, if he does, and he's also likely to try and leave it down. And he's been guillotined twice. I think he's been submitted 3 times, actually. And that is an incredibly bad sign against Leavitt, because Leavitt is a really, really, really venomous and destructive grappler. Like, really is. I hate that my mouse is double clicking because it's closing fight pages that I don't want. But anyways, yeah. I mean, a guy's been submitted twice by Thomas Gifford, once by Nick Brown. I can't take him to win this fight. I can't. There's no way. I mean, I can easily picture the win. I can picture him outpointing Leavitt on the feet, Leavitt being super awkward, lacking confidence, lacking technique, lacking posture on the feet. But that's not usually how he wins, and I make it a habit to not pick against type. Ogden is a guy whose game is out-grapple the other guy. And to me, that means he's going to try and he's going to fail. And despite Leavitt not even having great takedowns, he's really not hard to take down. So, yeah. There you go. Sam Slampage Hughes versus Isatella Nunez. Or Estella Nunez, pardon me. Nunes is a confusing book to me still, because her days in one championship, with the exception of fighting Angela Lee, who she lost to, was made up of standing at range with a low volume style and people just consenting to that fight. And when she came into the UFC and not having the physicality to match her. And when she came into the UFC, she got thrown in there with Ariane Carnelossi. And Carnelossi dominated. Pushed her around, put her in the cage, had her down on the ground. But the thing is that Carnelossi is also way more physical than Slampage is. But at the same time, Slampage is way more physical than the people that Nunes has beat. So where on that physicality scale do you have to be to beat Nunes? Maybe we'll find out. Maybe. I don't know. I'm inclined to pick Nunes still, because while I think she has a flawed game that is missing some key pieces, and I'm not sure how it responds to any kind of physicality, it is at least a game. There is at least an architecture there for something, and some things she does well. Whereas Sam Hughes probably got to the UFC way too early. She's not at a gym that I think she's going to progress all that much at. She's kind of a mess on a coordination level and a technical level. So while she could definitely win this fight by hunting down Nunes, pushing her in the cage, doing that kind of game, basically what Carnelossi did to a much lesser scale, I also could see Nunes just absolutely lighting her up. And I'm going to go with that. I'm going to go with Nunes to win a decision, because I don't think she'll finish Paige. I keep calling her Paige. It's Sam Hughes, Slampage. Also not really sure how she has a contract. I mean, don't get me wrong. Losing to Tisha Torres and Luma Luke Boomy is no shame. Those are two very good fighters. And even losing to Luana Pinheiro is not even really all that much of a problem. But it's kind of weird that she has lost as much as she's lost and still has a job with the UFC despite a 5-4 record. I don't know. Like, this feels like probably the end of the road for her. Hailey Alatang or Alatang Hailey versus Kevin Kroom. Last fight of the night. Interesting fight to open up the card with, because both of these guys feel kind of higher profile. Like, they have UFC wins. It's like they should be higher on this card. Kroom is aggressive. Probably to his own detriment at times. Bit of a mess. Fairly high output striker. We'll go for takedowns. Kind of your stereotypical hard-working Midwestern fighter, really. If there's a regional archetype for there, it's Kevin Kroom. And Alatang is very interesting because on one hand, he's actually a pretty good wrestler and grappler. Like, he legitimately is. But he is also... that's also not what he wants to be. He seems to want to be a ranged fighter that changes the tempo up periodically from flurries to like single power strikes. And he's not necessarily without tools for that game, but he has no way to really keep range. He almost always gets sucked into a close-up fight that involves wrestling and that involves pocket striking, which he doesn't necessarily seem to want to do. It's kind of weird. It's kind of Marcus Perez-like, where Marcus Perez was convinced that he was a karateka. But what he was really actually good at was random submissions and grappling. And he was quite good at them. And Alateng is kind of bizarrely the same. Still picking him here. Kroom's just not very physical, as you may have guessed from his 21-14 record. He's finishable. He's had some bad game plans in the past. That being said, I did not realize this. He is 5'11", and Alateng Haile is 5'5", and there is it's a 66.5 inch versus a 73-inch reach. My lord, I might regret this pick, but I am going with Alateng to win because he's done pretty well in the UFC. He's beaten Danon Tyrell, which is a win that's aging quite nicely. He beat Ryan Benoit. He would have beaten Gustavo Lopez if he didn't get the point taken away, and he had a reasonably competitive fight with Casey Kenny, who's really quite good. I don't really know what to make of his career, I guess. I think there's something to his game. I think there's some high points there. I don't really think the same of Kroom. And that's why I'm going to take him. It looks like the betting odds are kind of with me because Alateng is a minus 180 favorite. I don't know if that's going to be a good thing or not. But, not a good thing. I don't know if they're going to pan out the way I think it will, but I don't know. At the end of this fight card, I'm left with the impression that people aren't really looking forward to it. And I get it. It lacks name value. It lacks particular meaning for a UFC card. I don't know, but there's a lot of kind of weirdly interesting, weirdly entertaining fights that also could be terrible. It's two kind of weird fight cards in a row because there was the pay-per-view last week where from a analyst standpoint it seemed really clear cut. Not that everything was. I mean, Aljo Sterling won, for example. There wasn't a ton of supremely interesting on a technical level fights, but there was a lot of meaning and a lot of things to get hyped about and a lot of fighters with cachet. And this is almost the complete opposite. There's a complete lack of cachet. There's a complete lack of hype. But there's a bunch of fights that might actually be really good. So take it for what it is, I guess. Have a good Easter. I'll be up with my sisters celebrating the Easter. Doing a dinner with a family that I don't really know. So that's going to be awkward. And that's about it. So have a good one. And I hope you all enjoy.